Inflation makes the poor poor. It doesn't hurt us.
No, it's
if inflation is in asset prices, like the stock market, real estate, we make fortunes. But the working guy out there working for $50 an hour, whatever they work for today, he just took a haircut, and he can't afford to live.
That's right.
Okay, so this here, I just got, the Wall Street Journal just said that this morning.
Mm-hmm.
It said that Europe is shutting down because the vaccine's not working.
Right.
They vaccinate, but it doesn't work. People still get sick.
Yeah, especially with this new variant. Right.
So they're losing control. So rioting's blowing up in Europe, like Austria, big place. Turkey's in serious trouble. And so the world economy is coming apart. And if that crashes the stock market, that's the pensions.
Yeah, right.
My generation, the boomers, was 1974 when I came back from Vietnam. I find my poor dad broke, even with a PhD. Exactly as Marx predicted, the intellectuals would do.
Yeah.
So then in 74, ERISA comes out, which is the 401k. And today, as we speak, 10,000 boomers are retiring every year. And they're dependent upon the stock market. And if the euro-dollar system comes down, what do you think's going to happen to the U.S. stock market?
Yeah, and let's also think this through, because the Fed just came out with an announcement where they're taking the taper or their quantitative easing from 105 billion down to 75, and this is kind of on the path to raising interest rates. But it puts the central planners in a very precarious position, because right now, as most of your viewers know, we've got prices going up significantly in the United States. The CPI says it's 6.8%, but we know it's a lot higher than that. So we've got all this consumer price inflation. Okay, well, if the Fed comes out and increases interest rates, and if that does crash the stock market, that crashes people's 401k, then everyone's going to say, well, Fed save us. Fed save us. Where's the Fed put? Well, then if they come back and say, okay, well, we'll reduce interest rates back down to zero, we'll do quantitative easing again. But well, wait a minute, time out. Because remember, we've got inflation at 6.8%. So if they do that, then inflation most likely goes to 7 to 8 to 9, and that's as measured by the government. So they're in this we all are in this crazy position where either you lose a tremendous amount of purchasing power by the 401ks crashing, or you lose a tremendous amount of purchasing power by the prices of the stuff that the average American buys daily going up by 10, 15, maybe even 20% per year.
Correct. And that happened in 72 also when Nixon moved jobs into China. Do you know what I mean? I was of that generation watching all this stuff happening.
Yeah.
And the other thing that this book says here is, as you know, inflation makes the poor poor. It doesn't hurt us.
No, it's
if inflation is in asset prices, like the stock market, real estate, we make fortunes. But the working guy out there working for $50 an hour, whatever they work for today, he just took a haircut, and he can't afford to live.
That's right.
And then you have the southern border right on our border right here, wide open. People are coming in droves. They have smash and grabs. This is all stage 2 communism. And they defund the police. They're going to try and take our weapons away. This guy Kyle Rittenhouse, was an issue of gun control. Supposedly, the press reports that he shoots black people. He shot white people.
Yeah, right.
It is so screwed up, I can't believe it.
Becoming true today, right?
And this is the big one, okay? Who stole my pension? But Marx says the problem with capitalism, it leaves the bottom half poor. So you could be what they called middle class in capitalism in America. But capitalism will ultimately push you down into poverty.
Right.
And so in 74, I come back from Vietnam, ERISA comes out. ERISA is the 401k today. Now, you and I know what happens when that market crash is just coming.
Yeah.
The boomers, my generation, are toast.
Yeah, the middle class gets wiped out.
Yeah, because we're so dependent on this thing called a 401k, which is a defined contribution pension plan. The defined contribution means if you put in $1 million, hopefully get $1 million back. But the old pension plan was called a defined benefit. So if you worked for Ford Motor Company and they promised you $1,000 a month, Ford guaranteed $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
But a defined contribution, Wall Street, as long as Wall Street stayed up, it was a good deal. So the reason we wrote this book here is my classmates who flew for United Airlines and all that, they lost their pensions. PBGC, Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporations, they took their pensions. So as you and the reason we always get together, and we're talking with Jeff Snyder and all this, we're talking about the euro dollar crisis and how they're pumping up the stock market right now. My prediction is my generation, or affluent today, will be in poverty in 10 years.
Yeah, and I think I would take it a step further, because I think it's not just your generation, but it's American society, because now our economy is completely dependent upon the asset prices, or the assets that are in the 401k. So if the 401k crashes as a result of assets, that means the entire economy crashes. And that goes back to what Marx is saying. That's how those two books really dovetail on one another.
And there's one more thing that Marx was talking about. His complaint, which is accurate, that capitalism will turn the bottom half into poverty. He writes about how capitalism screws employees. He talks about how doctors and lawyers will no longer be exalted. This is in 1848. So those who read Rich Dad Poor Dad or the Cash Flow Quadrant, these were the employees. They're always afraid they're going to lose their job. So the smart guys were the S's, doctors, lawyers, accountants, and all this. And he says to this, in 1848, the capitalism was going to screw the S's.
Right.
And we screwed them via taxes.
Yeah, but I would argue that it wasn't free market capitalism that did that. It was the Fed, it was the central planners, ironically, that brought his predictions to fruition. He thought it would be the capitalists, where it was actually the central planners, if you really
who are Marxists.
Who are Marxists, there you go.
Yeah.
So it all comes full circle.
And that's why George goes around with it, and the Fed, and he and Robert Barnes are suing the Fed, and Ron Paul says, and the Fed, because if you read, not this book, but some of Marx's later books, and it was actually Stalin and Lenin who said, the Federal Reserve Bank is a Marxist organization.
Yeah.
Just like Black Lives Matter is Marxist. Now, I have no problem with that. Be upfront about it.
Yeah.
But everybody thinks the Fed is federal. It's not. It's a cartel.
Yeah. Yeah, and what it does is through quantitative easing, through artificially low interest rates, and through bailing out these huge corporations, it takes capitalism and it completely perverts it, it distorts it. And that's why I always use the term free market capitalism, not just capitalism. Because people like to argue and say, well, look at what happened during the GFC. That was a result of the global financial crisis. That was a result of capitalism gone amok. And look, the Fed came in and bailed out all these corporations. That's what capitalism does. I said, no. That has nothing to do with capitalism.
Amen.
And that has nothing to do with a free market. So if you look at things in terms of a free market, which is really what capitalism is, that does not involve bailouts.
Correct.
That involves actually letting businesses go bust. That's right.
Yeah.
So then those people who are prudent can come in, buy the assets, and that benefits society at large moving forward.
Correct. They were too big to fail, which is communism.
Yeah.
And so that's why the Fed is the third central bank, but it's not really a central bank. It's a Marxist organization.
Yeah. And I would say it's not just communism, but it's kind of this blend of corporatism. And so when I hear the word corporatism, the first thing that comes to my mind is what we saw in 2020, and especially with the lockdowns.
Got it.
Right? Because we basically told small and mid-sized businesses that you're no longer open for business. You can't do, you're bust, basically.
That's exactly what he's saying in this book.
Yeah, so that consolidates all of the demand to these huge mega corporations.
Correct.
So then is it easier, if you're someone, let's just say that's a Marxist, that's trying to control the means of production, is it easier to control the means of production when all goods and services are produced by 100 mega corporations or millions and millions and millions of small businesses?
Correct.
Obviously, those 100 mega corporations. So that would lead one to ask the question, well, was what we saw in 2020
the start of communism?
That's right. That's right.